During times of heavy rain, rivers can overflow their banks. The water flows onto large areas of flat, low land next to a river. These lowlands are the river's floodplain. Flowing onto its floodplain is a river's way excuse me, of spreading its extra water over a much larger area. But using its floodplain, a river can hold a large amount of water. That water slowly returns to the river later as the flow shrinks. You may have never seen a floodplain by a river because people have changed the landscape. Many floodplains have been changed into farmland. Many more have been used as land for building homes and stores. Many floodplains that were once wetlands have been drained of water. So here is a photo of a floodplain, a former floodplain, and now it's a farmland. Often the water flow in a river is low during the summer, fall, and winter. But in the spring, snow near the river's source begins to melt. The meltwater fills the river, so this could be happening right now. If there is a lot of rain during this time, the rainwater adds to the already heavy flow in the river. This can cause the river to overflow its bank in a flood. The extra water can flow into farmlands and cities. The result can be damage to crops, houses, stores, and roads. Floods can also cause the death of large numbers of animals and people. Floods can be very costly natural disasters. How can people protect themselves from the dangers of floods? For years, people have tried to prevent floods by digging deeper river channels. They have built dams to hold floodwater back, and they have built artificial river banks or levees to keep high river water flowing in the banks. But these expensive solutions often fail and cause even bigger problems. Nature has provided some effective defenses against floods. First of all, we must understand that periodic flooding is a natural and healthy part of river ecology. And natural floodplains and wetlands are part of the river systems and can reduce water flow. Here's how. So unfortunately, this was a devastating event with our floods, and you can see all the damage that floods could cause. Wetlands can soak up a lot of water. When water floods out of a river channel into a wetland, let me just make sure. All right, I'm going to move to this paragraph. The wetland plants slow the rate of flow in another way. So yesterday when we completed our science lab, we observed what happens when we place water into soil and compared it to water in gravel. Plants such as rushes and grasses provide barriers. So oftentimes if you're driving down the shore into New Jersey, you'll see a lot of these. The water must flow around and over the plants. This reduces the speed of water flowing down the main river channel. Most of the time, these are natural, but then also times these are planted in different areas to help with flooding. Here is a storm surge can produce huge waves that flood coastal. So here we can see rivers aren't the only sources of flood hazard. Ocean water is subject to tides. Every day the tide comes in and then goes out. When the highest tides flow in, low coastal areas might flood a little bit with seawater. But when large tropical storms come near shore, the strong winds can blow an extra load of seawater up onto the land. This kind of flood wave is called a storm surge. A storm surge wave can be several meters high. The surge can push water into towns along coastal areas. It can destroy buildings and leave several meters of salty water on land. Again, one of the best defenses against this kind of flood is a wetland. So you may see again these natural defenses. Wetlands exist along many parts of the coast, particularly at the mouths of rivers and creeks. Rushes and reeds, mangrove and cypress trees, and salt-tolerant grasses grow in the wetlands. These wetland plants form a natural barrier against the rushing surge water. Flowing the surge waters reduce the height of the surge. It reduces the force of its impact, and the wetlands limit how far the water flows inland. So in the back of my house, I have wetlands. And I know you wouldn't probably imagine that, but I do. So there are a lot of trees and tall grasses to try to absorb a lot of the water in a natural way. Wetlands also trap silt and sand, creating offshore land. In some places, the process creates barrier islands. Barrier islands are strips of narrow land a short distance from the shore. When you go to New Jersey, if you ever go to the beach, you actually go onto the barrier islands. You cross a bridge and you will enter one of the islands. They provide a large buffer zone between the open ocean and coastal cities. The only problem is that people like to build their homes on these beautiful islands. These homes have no buffer against the full force of surges when tropical storms strike. Some climatologists, so those are scientists who study the climate, think that tropical storms are getting more powerful. These storms may bring heavier than usual rainfall and produce more frequent floods. It would be wise for people living in a flood zone to make plans to protect their wetlands. City planners, farmers, geologists, engineers, we've heard that word many times this year, biologists, teachers, and students can work together to preserve wetlands and floodplains. The result would reduce the damage effect of these floods. Thinking about wetlands for flood control. 1. Have there been floods in your community? What caused them? What was the effect of the floods? 2. Is there a floodplain in your community? How is it used? 3. Is there a wetland in your community? How does that wetland help reduce the effects of floods? Let's focus on the first question, and please post that to your Google Classroom.